Hey everyone, it's Carissa Wiley. Thanks for joining me here on the My Favorite Things YouTube channel for Sparkle and Shine. Today I thought it would be fun to take a look at some Copic hair coloring. Now I want to start out by saying that I am no expert when it comes to Copic coloring at all, but these are some tips and tricks that I found really work for me when I'm coloring hair with Copic markers. I'm going to be using the new My Favorite Thing Friendship Rocks stamp set. I thought this was so adorable. I love these girls and I love the sayings as well. And I'm also going to be using the coordinating dies and the In the Spotlight stencil for my project today. So I wanted to give you a look at the products I'm using before we jump into the card project itself. Now to start out, I have all of my stamps mounted on my MISTI, and I'm inking these up with a Copic friendly black ink and stamping them onto some Neenah Solar White 110-pound cardstock. I've kind of started gravitating towards the 110-pound cardstock with the Neenah because when I die cut my elements, I find that they have a much sturdier appearance and they don't kind of bend and fold as much once they're stuck in the envelope. It's just a personal preference. If you have the 80-pound, please use it. You could always cut an extra plain white die cut and put it behind if you kind of want to make your 80-pound cardstock a little bit sturdier. So I've stamped all of these images twice, and now I'm going to start my Copic coloring. Now before we get to our hair, we're going to color the skin on these little gals here. I'm starting out with the E50 marker and I'm adding kind of just like a light wash over the entire skin areas. Then I'm coming in with my E00 and I'm adding in some shadows. And before I come in with my darkest marker, I'm going to add a little R20 to the cheeks for some blush. And then I'll bring in the E11 marker. This is my darkest marker, and you can see how it really increases the contrast in those shaded areas. Now I'm going to go back to the E00 and blend out that E11 so that I get a nice smooth transition, being careful not to blend away all of that contrast either. And then I'll finally finish it off by going back to my E50 and kind of blending everything together. Now, because my memory is not that great, I keep a binder with some of my favorite Copic colors in it, and I referred back to that to kind of pick some hair colors for today. For this first combination, I am starting out with the YR21, and I'm marking out my highlight areas. Then I'm going to come in with my darkest marker, which is my YR27, and I'm going to start flicking in from the roots and the ends. And I am not using a solid coloring motion. I'm going to just add in the darkest areas, and then I'm going to come in with my medium marker and flick further in towards that light area. Now, I am not using a solid coloring motion because hair has kind of that high and low. It has some texture to it. You can definitely use this with a, solid coloring motion, but I find that I like my hair more with a little bit of texture. Now, I'm coming back to my lightest marker and I'm flicking in the highlight areas once again, but I will say that by flicking, I am not covering the entire surface of the stamped images. If you look at my stamped and colored image very closely, you will see areas with a tiny bit of white left, and I think that kind of adds to that highlight area. So I'm going to show you this again. I've come in with my second set of markers here. For this color combination, I'm using E33, E35, and E57, and that E57 is going to really add contrast to this hair color combination here. It's going to add some really nice darks. Now, something I like to do also is I like to come back in after I've worked through my markers. So I start out with my light, I go to my dark and my medium, and I add a little bit of light once again. I like to go back to my darkest marker once again and really make those dark areas really nice and dark. That adds to the contrast, and it kind of creates a bigger gap between my light color and my dark color. And it really accentuates those highlight areas because the dark gets a little bit darker, and I don't tend to go back in with the lightest marker and add more light because I want there to be a bigger gap between that light and dark. I just find that it increases the contrast and it really gives me a look that I really like. Now, I thought I would also explore some alternative hair colors as well. So since these girls are kind of rocker chicks, I thought I would try some different color combinations for hair. So I'm starting out with RV34. I'm using the RV17 and the RV19. Now I'm using the same technique here. I'm just using bright, bold colors instead. So this one tends to be, or it ends up being a more kind of purpley magenta-y color. I also colored one with an RV21, 25, and 29. That was more of like a hot pink version of hair. And I colored one with some BG markers as well, which gave me that really cool kind of teal blue, almost mermaid-like hair. The three colors that I used for that were the BG32, the BG15, and the BG09. And that 09, once again, was a nice deep dark marker that gave me a lot of contrast. So like I mentioned before, I'm just going in. I like to mark out my highlight areas first. And I know that you're probably, for me, I struggled for years, like, what's the highlight area? And sometimes I feel like we overthink these things, right? I mean, first of all, number one, it's a card, right? I mean, it doesn't have to be perfect. So I've stopped worrying about where my shadows are so much. I've kind of put them in areas that feel natural to me, and then I've just kind of gone with it. And the more that I practice, the more that I find that I'm pleased with my final result. But I don't like to put the pressure on myself to feel like my coloring has to be perfect all the time. But as I find things that do work for me, I like to share them with other people. So that's kind of where my theory on Copic coloring lies. But for the highlight, I normally just find the part that I think would be sticking out the most. So there's a bend on her head here, and that curve around her head is where kind of the highlight would be. Like I said, nothing with my shading and my shadowing is perfect, but I found these little tricks that work for me, and that's what I like to stick with. So once all my little gals are colored here, I'm going to use the coordinating dies to die cut these with my Gemini Junior. You can use any die cut machine that you have. I do like to use a little bit of that delicate surface painter's tape to hold my dies in place as I run them through my die cut machine. And you can see all of my adorable little girls here that are ready to go on some cards. Now, I have to admit, I went about a million different directions before I determined what would be my final card design here. And I loved my girls, but sometimes finishing off the card can be the hardest part. Am I right? I mean, you have these elements that you love, but you can't always figure out how exactly you want to put them together. So what I found in those situations that works for me is just to keep it simple. So I'm going to create a simple backdrop for a couple of my gals. Now you're seeing the gals over to the left that have the colorful hair. I'm actually going to be using the ones that have the kind of more natural colored hair on this card. And I've started out by adhering my In the Spotlight stencil with some delicate surface painter's tape, and it's adhered over a piece of Neenah Solar White 110-pound cardstock. And now I'm just using some tonic Nuvo glimmer paste in the color Moonstone, and I'm smearing that all over, just kind of filling in that area. Now when I'm done, I want to make sure that I clean up my palette knife and I clean up my stencil, because this stuff is a booger if you let it dry on your stencils. Just trust me here. I'm using a baby wipe to quickly clean it up, but you'll want to take it over after you baby wipe it to a sink and kind of give it some good warm soapy water to kind of clean it up from that glimmer paste. So now I'm going to heat emboss a couple of sentiments, so I have some options. I have some black cardstock that I treated with my powder tool. I stamped a couple of different sentiments on either end using some Versamark ink, and now I'm coating those with some white embossing powder, and I'm going to heat set them. Now I have the You're a Superstar, and I'm so glad we're in sync. Now, if you don't know who NSYNC is, then I don't know if we can be friends. I'm just kidding. I love NSYNC. I'm an NSYNC girl. I actually was a big Lance Bass fan. A lot of the girls like Justin Timberlake at that time. I was a Lance Bass fan. Now I'm a total JT fan. I mean, is it me, or does he just get better looking as he gets older? And he's hilarious too. Anyway, I digress. I'm a big NSYNC fan. That's the sentiment that I used because, I mean, like, bye, 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 right? I mean, who doesn't love NSYNC music? I still play it. My kids think I'm ridiculous. I play their Christmas album every year. Okay, so anyway, I had my girls. I figured out how I wanted to put them on the card along with my sentiment. And now I'm taking this cluster of stars and I'm going to die cut a bunch of stars all around this spotlight area. And I'm going to kind of make this really fun background for my girls. Now, this wasn't exactly what I had planned to begin with, but I was just going to do a couple of clusters of these stars. And then I started going and it ended up being an entire arch. But I like the way it turned out. So all's well that ends well, right? And if you wanted to use those stars for like some confetti shaker, some confetti in a shaker or something, you totally could. I think I tossed mine because let's just be honest, I don't know where to keep those. So I adhered my girls onto the front of my card front using some foam adhesive. I got them all kind of tucked in there. I'm adding a little bit of this Tonic Nuvo glitter pen in the Midas Touch. It's kind of a gold glitter pen over their bows and the tips of their microphones, kind of like that foam area that you would have on your microphone. And now I am taking my Distress Oxide inks and I'm quickly creating a rainbow background to go behind this card front that I've created. And I'm doing it right on my card base. So this is an A2 size card base. It's top folding. It's cut to 4 1/4 by 11 and scored at 5 1/2 to create my card base. And once I quickly blended it on, it looks like a hot mess, right? But once I put this panel over the top, you're not even going to be able to tell. I put my card front over the top using some more foam adhesive to kind of give it a little bit of shadow and dimension. And then I just finished off my card with a little bit more sparkle. I added some sparkling clear confetti from Pretty Pink Push, and I'm adhering that on with the Ranger Collage Medium in the matte finish that I have just in a fine tip applicator bottle. So there you have it, my completed project featuring the new Friendship Rocks stamp and die set from My Favorite Things. I think this set is so much fun. I hope you enjoyed this project. I hope you got some inspiration for your next crafting session. And I hope you enjoyed hearing the tips and tricks that work for me when I'm coloring hair with Copic markers. Thanks for stopping by today. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to the My Favorite Things YouTube channel so you won't miss any of the fabulous card making and paper crafting video tutorials here. Thanks for stopping by. Thanks for watching. And until next time, I hope you have a fabulous day.